All right, welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our virtual event with Ironman champions Sarah Piampiano and Linsey Corbin. My name is Meg Duncan, and I'm the Youth and Collegiate Development Program Manager at USA Triathlon. We're excited to have Sarah and Linsey here today to talk about their experience as professional triathletes. Initially, we had sent out the invitation for our collegiate club athletes so that they can hear a little bit about their experience with that. And we also extended it to our members. So we're excited to see all of you here today. I'm going to start by introducing you to both Sarah and Linsey and tell you a little bit about them. You've probably read a little bit about their bios, but I'll start with that and then I'll end with a few housekeeping items. So first off, Linsey Corbin is a professional triathlete who lives and trains in her hometown of Bend, Oregon. She is an 8-time Ironman champion and has received top American honors at both the Ironman and 70.3 World Championships. Linsey studied exercise physiology at the University of Montana and has always had a passion for sport nutrition and endurance sports. When she's not racing and training, Linsey enjoys spending time with her husband, Chris, and their golden retriever, Jimmy. Not only is Linsey a professional triathlete, she's an amateur chef, connoisseur of tasty treats, and is always up for an outdoor adventure. And then a little bit about Sarah. Let's chat about Sarah. So she's Maine-born, a professional triathlete who now resides and trains full-time in Northern California under the guidance of Purple Patch Fitness founder and coach, Matt Dixon. Piampiano is a 4-time Ironman champion with a career best time of 8 hours, 40 minutes, 46 seconds, setting the 3rd fastest time ever for an American woman at the Ironman distance. She is a 7-time Ironman 70.3 champion and has placed as the 7th overall female and 2nd American female at the Ironman World Championships in 2015 and 2016. Wow, just hearing about them. How exciting are you guys today? So yes, we're so excited. I just want to go through a few items so that you know kind of what's next and what's happening. Following their discussion, so we'll have Linsey go first and then Sarah. We'll have a Q&A after. Several of you submitted questions and emailed me in advance, which is great. Feel free to submit questions in the chat box. You can either submit it to the whole group or you can send me a question directly during the call. At the bottom of your screen, you should see that chat where you can submit your questions. We're excited to have both athletes join us for the call, and we'll be giving out some great Rudy Project and Roka prizes as part of the event. So stay for the end of the call, so we'll be announcing those winners at the very end. In addition, Rudy Project, who is a long-standing partner of ours at USA Triathlon and a personal sponsor of Sarah's, has extended Sarah's ambassador discount to everyone here today. Check out the chat bar for her details, which will get you 35% off all inline items and an extra 10% off of outlet items. Please make sure to keep this information to yourself since it's an extra bonus for engaging with us today. And then lastly, since Rudy Project and Roka are giving away their prizes, I just wanted to review them. It's 2 pairs of Trellix glasses, 2 Volantis helmets, and then 2 Roka $50 gift cards. Lastly, I just wanted to remind everybody that you'll be muted during the call. So please don't ask questions by unmuting yourself. Send me those questions through the chat box. And then we're going to try our best to get through as many of the questions as we can. We've already received over 10. So we're going to really hope that we can get through them. And some of them have crossover, so we should be able to get through as many as possible. Lastly, for the 6 winners that are announced, I'll announce it at the end of the call with your names. You do not need to do anything further. I'll reach out using the email address that you provided when you registered. All right, we're so excited to have both of you here today. Linsey, let's take it away. And I will unmute you, okay?
I like that all the power is in Meg's hands. I tried to unmute myself and it wouldn't even let me. It's like, it's all Meg. She's the key holder. But yeah, thanks for the introduction and thanks for hopping on to all of you. As Meg said, my name is Linsey Corbin and I was a collegiate triathlete. And so when the pandemic hit and stay-at-home orders, and a lot of the races were canceled. I was thinking of ways that I could reach out to the community, and I've always had a soft spot in my heart for the collegiate demographic, just because I was a collegiate triathlete, and that's definitely how I got my start in triathlon. So yeah, I guess I would just start today. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about how I got my start in triathlon and kind of 3 of the lessons that I learned from being a collegiate athlete that have helped me become a professional athlete and sort of progress through my career. I am in my 14th year as a professional triathlete, and it started all being a collegiate athlete. So I feel really fortunate that I've had such a long career, and I'm thankful for the lessons that I learned as a collegiate athlete. And I think that they sort of have laid the foundation for the career that I've been able to have. So for those of you that are on the call that are collegiate athletes, yeah, big thumbs up to you. And I hope that you are enjoying the experience as much as I did, because it was a huge part of the pathway to my career. But I started out actually running collegiate cross country and track at UC Davis, and I was going there for a scholarship, and I did it for a year, and I just did not enjoy it at all. It was a lot different than being a competitive runner in high school. And so I transferred to the University of Montana, and I was looking for an outlet. I was kind of craving adventure and looking to make a new group of friends. And so I got hooked up with the University of Montana Triathlon club team. And yeah, I actually didn't know how to swim at the time. I could like swim at the lake or the river from growing up, but I'd never put on a pair of goggles. I'd never done a flip turn. I didn't know what a pace clock was, nothing. So I was very, very green to the sport. But I was studying exercise physiology, and a lot of the students in the exercise physiology lab were also on the collegiate club team. And so they kind of, yeah, I guess the two went hand in hand together, that these were my friends that I was hanging out with, but they also were doing this thing called triathlon, and it looked like a big adventure to me. So I guess when I look back on my collegiate career, one of the first lessons that I kind of got from being a collegiate athlete that has helped me, and when I look back at that, is that it was just such a fun experience for me. We didn't have power meters or heart rate monitors, and a lot of our training was based on like adventures and big training days, and we would road trip down to Moab and do these big training camps for our spring break. And yeah, a lot of it was just setting this foundation of going out there, giving your best effort, having fun with it, really enjoying the process, and not thinking about race outcomes or winning or anything like that. And I was lucky that we actually were a pretty successful club team at the time. Our club races were at Lake Havasu and Wildflower, and we always placed in the top 3, and we had a lot of really talented athletes, but the focus was never really on the outcome. A lot of it was just on these big adventure training days and having a lot of fun. And then towards the end of my career, when I was a collegiate athlete, I didn't have a coach, and we didn't have a set training plan. It was more just, we would set out and be like, all right, here's what we want to do. And we would kind of follow these loose guidelines. But towards the end of my senior year, I was looking for something to do to celebrate being done with college. And a lot of the people in the exercise physiology lab were doing the Ironman in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And I was really naive, and I didn't really know. And I was just like, oh, an Ironman. Sure, that sounds fun. Like, all my friends on the college team were doing it. I'll do it. And so that's kind of the second lesson, was that was the first time that I actually applied myself to a training plan. Because here I was going to do an Ironman, which, if you don't know, is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 mile bike, and then after that, you run a marathon. And so I had no clue what I was doing or what I was getting myself into. And that was kind of when I was like, okay, I think I need a plan for this, and I need to follow this plan and really buy into it and accept this whole process and take it step by step to get myself ready for the race. And so that was the first time, that I really had applied myself. And we didn't have individual coaching plans, but we had a friend in the exercise phys lab that wrote a plan for all 15 of us that were doing Ironman Coeur d'Alene to follow. And so each week we would get sort of benchmark workouts that we would do. And if we completed those workouts, and it was like, okay, I think we're getting ready. I think we're getting ready. And as I started to race that spring, the Ironman Coeur d'Alene was in June, at the end of June. And as I started to race that spring, I had actually applied myself to this training plan and I got pretty fit. And I started to do really well in the collegiate races that I was doing and the amateur races. And I started winning my age group and doing really well. And Ironman Coeur d'Alene was coming up and I was getting really excited, but I was super duper nervous for the swim because I didn't really know how to swim until I basically been swimming about a year and a half. And an Ironman at the time, they had these mass swim starts for the amateur athletes. And so you were starting with 2,000 other athletes in the swim. And that was probably what I was most nervous about for the race. And so my friends in the exercise phys lab were joking around with me and they said, you know that if you get your pro card, you can get a head start on the swim and you don't have to start with the mass swim start. And so basically, not only was I getting ready to do my first Ironman, but 2 weeks before the race, I applied to USAT for my pro license. I got it and I emailed Ironman and I basically switched from the age group category to the professional category purely so I didn't have to do the mass swim start. And so I got the plush head start on the swim at Ironman Coeur d'Alene. And I had, I didn't really know what to expect for my first Ironman, but I was super lucky in that it was a really hot day. And a lot of the women ended up dropping out of the race and walking. And I didn't know any difference. And I just kept plugging away all day long. And I was resilient. And I had this never give up attitude. And I ended up finishing, I think, 6th in the field. And I qualified for the Ironman World Championships, which was like, my ultimate goal was that I really wanted to go to Kona. And so that was kind of like, at the time, all I was really thinking of was like, I'm just going to do this Ironman once, and then I'm going to qualify for Ironman Hawaii on like a dream day, and then I'll be done with it. And so I definitely did not foresee at the time when I was a college athlete that 14 years later, I would have traveled the world and won all these Ironmans and done all these cool things. It was definitely a very short-sighted. The only reason I raced as a professional was basically so I could get a head start on the swim. And so that summer I was training and getting ready for Ironman Hawaii. And kind of the third lesson that I learned that year was that I got married that summer at the end of August. And a week after I got married, Ironman Hawaii was in about 6 weeks or so. And the week after we got married, I was out on a training ride and I got hit by a car that ran a stop sign. And I was on my bicycle and I went through the windshield of the car and I don't remember anything. I just remember being in my TT bars and I looked up and there was a Toyota Sequoia SUV right in front of me. And the last thing I thought was like, I'm dead. And then I woke up and I was in the hospital. And so here I was, like a newly minted professional triathlete. I was supposed to go to the Ironman in Hawaii, and I had suffered this huge concussion, and I broke my collarbone in 6 places. And that was the first time that I was exposed that being a professional triathlete is cool, but there's also a lot of really big disappointments that can come with it. And so that was sort of the first setback that I had faced in my career. And again, I had this mentality of like, I only want to do Ironman Hawaii once. Like, I just want to go. And so I trained with this sling on and I focused on the things that I could do. I couldn't swim at all, obviously, with a broken collarbone, but I could ride the trainer. And if I wore this figure 8 brace and ran with my arm in a sling, I could run. And so I did what I could do and I prepared for the Ironman in Hawaii. And basically I went to Hawaii and my first swim was in the ocean the week of the race. And I still was healing from my collarbone because I didn't have surgery to heal it. So yeah, the swim did not feel very good, but I did my first Ironman Hawaii in 2006 and kind of the rest is history. Yeah, I just I made a deal with my husband that I wanted to keep racing professional for one more year just to see if I could make any money. And that was in 2007. And I ended up making some money, and then we just kind of kept the ball rolling, and yeah, kind of the rest is history. So yeah, so like, I guess the 3 lessons that I learned that first year as a collegiate athlete was just to like have fun and really enjoy like the adventure and pushing yourself, and sort of the foundational lessons that I still apply now as an athlete. I learned a lot in that first year. And then the second lesson that I learned was to follow a plan, whatever the plan is from your coach, or whether it's a training plan, and really stick to it and commit to it, which is definitely like part of the process and where you definitely like see the progress. And then the third lesson I learned is that things don't always go according to plan, and that being a professional athlete definitely comes where the highs are high, and I can't even put into words how amazing it is to hold up the finish line banner and win an Ironman. It's the coolest, biggest endorphin high you'll ever feel. But then with that, there's definitely some low points that come with it. And being an endurance athlete and just having resilience and knowing how to sort of weather the storm when things are difficult has led to a lot of success for me. So yeah, so those are kind of my 3 big lessons that I wanted to start with. And then obviously we are in a state of needing some resiliency right now with the pandemic going on and coronavirus, and everyone sort of in a different state, lots of races being canceled. And that was initially why Sarah and I reached out to USAT to talk to you all, was just, I know it's challenging for everyone. And I've actually said that as endurance athletes, we're probably the best demographic to be equipped for what we're going through right now, because most endurance athletes and triathletes that I know are really resilient individuals. And I just wanted to chat for a few minutes about how I'm handling what we've been going through right now. And a lot of it goes back to some of the lessons that I hinted at when I was a collegiate athlete, is that I'm focusing on the things that I can do. And I think initially it's really easy to think like, oh, I've lost all this fitness because my A race was canceled. Or for me personally, as a non-swimmer, I worked really hard this winter on my swim. And I was so excited because I was making all these gains in the water, and then the pools closed. And I live in Oregon, and where I live, our pools are still closed with no sign of opening anytime soon. And I live in a mountain town, so the water's pretty darn cold for open water swimming. And so, yeah, I guess the easy way to think would be like, oh my gosh, I made all these gains in the swim, and now I haven't moved my arms in water since basically March 5th, I think was the last time I swam. And so, yeah, it's easy to sit there and get discouraged, but instead I have switched the mentality to like, okay, what can you do? And so for me, for the swimming, I've been doing a lot of at-home strength training, working on flexibility and mobility, keeping the range of motion in my arms. And again, rather than focusing on races that haven't happened, I've had to really practice having the mentality of like living in the present and focusing not on the races that haven't happened, and not creating anxiety of like, is this race going to happen? Is it not? You know, the Ironman World Championships got moved to February. Is that really going to happen? Is it not? A lot of it has just been like taking it week by week and setting small goals for myself to keep myself motivated from week to week. So I could talk more about it. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions, but the last thing I wanted to say was that I've been a pro for 14 years, and I look back on what I have loved most about my career as a triathlete. And obviously the wins are super memorable and important and things that I cherish, but probably the things that I will remember most when I retire will be the memories and the friendships that I've made through triathlon. And so I'm super excited to sort of pass the buck to Sarah to talk, because Sarah and I met early on in Sarah's career, and we actually shared the same coach, Matt Dixon, for a while, who I don't work with anymore, but Sarah still works. But I was at Sarah's first Ironman in Coeur d'Alene, and she raced as an age grouper. And I remember cheering her on and not letting her give up an ounce on the run course when it was so hot out and she was so tired. But yeah, I guess that's what I'll remember most, are the friendships that I've made. And so I'm thankful that Sarah and I, we share a couple sponsors we have in common together. So we get to work together throughout the year. And she's also an extremely talented athlete and a fierce competitor. So it's fun to always be able to race each other, but then be friends off the course as well. So now I'm going to let Sarah speak.
Thanks, Linz. Hi, everybody. I am Sarah Piampiano. Just to kind of play off of what Linsey was saying for a second, she was talking about doing her first Ironman in Coeur d'Alene, and it was bringing me back to memories of when I did my first Ironman, which was also in Coeur d'Alene, and the fact that Linsey was there. And she was, I don't remember if you were injured, Linsey, or I don't know what was going on, but she was there. And the whole day she was on this bike, just biking along the course going, go Sarah, you're going to break 10 hours. You can do it. She was saying all the right things, at the times when I was hurting the most. And it's really amazing how, I've been pro now. This is my 10th year racing professionally, and how our relationship has grown. And I also remember going to our first camp in Tucson, Linsey, and I wasn't pro yet, and I was racing, and I looked up to her with such admiration and inspiration. So it's really cool to look back at all the relationships that you form. And I think, like she said, it's really one of the most important things through this whole journey. So anyway, it's so nice to see all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited to be here and to be able to talk to you guys. I was listening to some of the messages that Linsey was talking about, and actually a lot of the things that I was going to suggest are similar in a lot of ways to what she was saying. I want to talk a little bit about how to have longevity in the sport. So whether or not you're looking to make the transition to race professionally out of college, or it's just something that you really want to continue to incorporate in your life going forward, I thought I might give you some tips that I've learned since I started doing triathlon. I want to talk a little bit about burnout, because I think that that's something that, if you haven't struggled with it, it's something that's probably going to come up at some point in your career within triathlon or in life in general. And then also I wanted to give my thoughts on COVID. So in terms of longevity of the sport, whether or not you want to become pro, or you're just interested in trying to keep triathlon or any endurance sport in your life long term, I think that there's a couple sort of key things. Number one, I would say, is to know your why. And you may have heard this before, but I actually think it's a really, really important tip. I remember back in 2017, I really wanted to go after trying to win the Ironman World Championships. That was like my singular focus goal the entire year. And I actually, in the process, became so obsessed with just winning. And if I didn't win, I viewed that as a failure, that I completely lost track of why I even did the sport of triathlon in the first place. It was like every session that I was doing, I was over analyzing. I, viewed everything as a pass or fail, and whether or not it was bringing me to the road of winning Kona. And I actually completely lost track of why I was doing it. And that season, I didn't really enjoy what I was doing. And it took me a while to sort of come out of that. But when I took a step back and started thinking about my why and why I do triathlon, it really came down to actually less about the results and more about the process. And it kind of goes back to what Linsey was saying about, going on those road trips and having fun and doing all these things that were really exciting. And at the end of the day, the accolades that we get in this sport are wonderful. Like Linsey said, crossing the finish line and winning is one of the best things, one of the best feelings. It's just so crazy. I can't even explain it to you. But if you want to be in this sport long term, and it's something that you really want to have as part of your life, you have to love the process. You have to love the journey. And as amazing as being a professional is, there's so many great things about it. It's also really, really hard. And at times it can be really lonely. Linsey, I'm sure, can tell you. And we spend countless hours training by ourselves, and times when we're so tired, you don't even think that you can get a workout in, but you just have to plug forward. And if you really love the process and you really love the journey, even during the worst times when you're the most tired or it's just a grind, that's really what is going to keep you in the game for the long term. If you're really just doing it to win a race, or you're not really enjoying the day in and day out grind of it all, it's going to be something that's going to be hard to be part of for a long period of time. So loving the process and knowing your why, I would say, is number one. Number two is kind of along with that, which is looking at the long game. So I think that it can be really hard sometimes to get too caught up in how things are going, either on a day-to-day basis or a week-to-week or even month-to-month. You know, some months you may have periods of time where you're just not training well and it's not that fun and it's just a grind, and other periods of time where things are flowing and it's a lot easier. But if you just take a long-term approach and you know that having consistency is the most important thing, then what you're going to see long-term is gain. So it's not going to be a straight upward trajectory. You're going to have ups and downs and probably some injuries along the way and times when it's, it's harder than others. But if you have a long-term approach and you don't get too caught up in how good a workout is one day or the next day. I mean, I definitely know that I can kill it one day and then the next day I'm so tired I feel like I don't even know how I'm a professional athlete. So you're definitely going to have these ups and downs, and just taking a long-term approach and not trying to get too caught up is another important thing. And the last thing I would say in terms of having a long-term tenure in the sport is to be really humble. Particularly if you're interested in trying to race professionally, it is a whole different ballgame when you step up to the pro ranks. And if you can be a really, really successful age group or collegiate athlete, when you step up to the pro ranks, everybody is really good. And so the difference between, the person who's getting first or third or fifth or sixth, it's very small. And sometimes it's a little bit intimidating because maybe the bike is your strength and the swim is your weakness. And you're used to getting on the bike and suddenly just like passing everybody and getting to the front. Well, now you step up to the pro ranks and like everybody's a strong cyclist. So just being humble and open to learning and just taking in as much information as you can is something that I would really encourage you guys all to do. It's, even now, both Linsey and I have won quite a few titles, and I would say that we're both still pretty humble, and we get humbled on a regular basis. When we line up against some of these women, I mean, it's just incredible how amazing the women in the sport are, or as men, how incredible the men in the sport are. It's just, the athleticism is incredible. So just really take the opportunity to learn. Burnout, something that I think we all probably can relate to. If you haven't had experienced burnout yet, you will at some point in your life. I wanted to talk a little bit about how to sort of avoid it. I think inevitably it's not avoidable, but you can manage it. And so the first thing I would say is I would partner with a coach who really has your long-term development and long-term tenure in the sport in mind. I'll give you an example. When I first started doing triathlon, I was 29 years old, and 29. And I did my first triathlon. I got hooked on it. I totally fell in love with it. I went out, I bought a bike, I started training, I went into a second triathlon and I won. And I thought, I'm going to be the next world champion. I'm going to win the gold medal at the Olympics. This is going to be amazing. If this is going to happen to me, I need to be coached by the best coach in the world. And so I reached out to a bunch of coaches I had researched, and I went to them and I said, I want to be world champion. I'm going to start racing pro. And every single one of them said, okay, no problem. I'll coach you, or I don't have the capacity or whatever. And then I talked to Matt Dixon, and Matt said to me, well, if I coach you, you can't start racing pro until I tell you that you're ready, because it's really important, if you want to have a long-term career, that you take your approach to racing professionally in a very professional way. Meaning, he felt like I was really new to the sport. He felt like I still needed to evolve physically. He felt like I needed to get more experience racing to evolve emotionally and mature emotionally within the sport. he felt like if I just started racing pro right off the bat, that I was going to get my butt handed to me, which is really funny because I'm listening to Linsey's story about just starting to race pro so that she could get a head start on the swim. And it's like such a different approach. And she actually was also coached by Matt at one point in her career. But I thought that it was really good advice, actually. And I would encourage most people to try to take that same approach. When you step into the pro ranks, it's a whole new ball game. And if you're not ready for it, you can just really have your butt handed to you, and it can be quite demoralizing. But if you really want to make a career out of it, sometimes you need to make more developments as an athlete in the age group ranks before you make that jump. And so I ended up working with Matt, even though he was the only coach who didn't want me to race pro. I wanted to work with him because I really felt like he had my long-term interests in mind, and what he wanted to see is somebody who is going to be successful within the pro ranks and have a long-term career versus somebody that just qualified for their pro card and decided to take it and was going to race pro. So definitely find a coach that you think has your long-term interests in mind. The second tip I would say is to make sure that you take time off. Now, I know when I was just out of college or in college, taking time off was like not something that I was interested in. I was so motivated. I was so excited that I was doing. By the way, I could like go out and party all night and then wake up the next morning and do a 12-mile run, no problem. I cannot do that now. But I think that if you really want to have a long-term career and you want to avoid burnout, you have to have the confidence to take time off. As I've gotten older in my age, and also as my career has progressed, I've become more and more willing to take time off. When I first started racing professionally, for me to take a week off was like taking a month off, versus now I take 2 1-week breaks during the course of a year. I take 1 2-week break, and then I take 1 4 to 6 week break. So it's like around 8 weeks over the course of the season that I take off. And the 1-week break and the 2-week break are they're just speckled throughout the season. Like while I'm racing, I usually take a big mid-season break, the 2-week break, usually around July or August before I do my big Kona push. And then December, when I'm done racing, that's when I take my 4 to 6 week break. But it takes a lot of courage to rest. And I think particularly the younger you are, the more motivated you are, and the more you're able to bounce back, and you think that you don't need to take time off. But I would really, really encourage you to do that. It's going to help with the long term. And then the last tip I have is to take a balanced approach. So kind of like what Linsey was saying, you just have to make it fun. And also don't take yourself too seriously right now. I think, I don't encourage going out and partying all the time, but I do think, go out and party. And it's okay to go and eat the pizza. Like, you don't need your nutrition to be dialed in all the time. I think it's important to take it seriously if you're interested in having performance goals, but also allow yourself the time to enjoy other aspects of your life. And the more balanced you are right now and at kind of a younger age, I think the longer it's going to help you in terms of having a long career and not burning out. And then the last thing I want to talk about is also about Corona. I think the number one message that both Linsey and I wanted to probably convey is there's not a right approach for anybody. I think, and I would also encourage you not to be swayed by what other people are doing. I think the number one thing that you can do to probably have a successful approach to Corona is to reflect and look within inside yourself and know what you need for yourself. And so, for example, I have a training partner that she and I train very closely together. Her name is Chelsea Sidaro. She's another professional athlete. And she and I mean, normally we're training every single day together, but our approaches to COVID are a little bit different. So for me, I feel like I still definitely need structure. So I want to have a plan. So my coach, Matt, is writing me a plan. I want to have things that I'm focusing on and working towards, like what Linsey was saying. So right now we're really working on doing kind of a bike project. I've been biking really well. And so we're sort of rolling with that and working on some things on the bike. Chelsea and I've been doing, the other thing is that I am not really wanting to have really structured intensity workouts. So all of my intensity is doing Strava Queen of the Mountain attempts or Zwift races, which are just like super fun. It's light, but I'm still getting a really great effort. And I still have some structure, but I'm also leaving it open. So for example, there was one day when I just had a 2-hour ride on my schedule, and I was riding along and I felt great and it was beautiful outside. I was just totally loving life. And I thought, okay, I'm going to go ride 100 miles. And so I did that. And normally when we're in season and we have quite a strict plan that we need to stick to, I don't do things like that. But right now with COVID, I'm giving myself a little bit of flexibility mixed with structure. Chelsea, on the other hand, really feels like she wants to have a lot of structure and doesn't want to deviate as much from that. And that's what she needs, which is fine. So I think, like I said, I think there's no real right answer. Just think about what's important for you and communicate that with your coach if you have one, but just, do what's right for you. And that's the best thing I can say.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. I'm gonna unmute both Linsey and Sarah right now. We're gonna move into Q&A. Thanks so much for submitting all of your questions. They've been awesome to look through, and kind of we have so many that I'm gonna try to get through as many as we can. The first question that we have is, I go to a university where triathlons and endurance sports are not offered. What types of races should I do in order to progress my triathlete career? Sarah or Linsey, what might you offer for that? Do you want to go first, Sarah?
Sure. Well, certainly during COVID, I think that there's a couple of different options. With triathlons, traditional triathlons not going on, I think there's a number of things you can do. You can participate. There's so many Zwift races that you can do, which I think one of the big overall things to progressing as a triathlete is actually building bike fitness and bike resilience. It's really going to help your overall fitness, and it will also help you with the run, which may seem a little bit counterintuitive, but the stronger you get on the bike, oftentimes that will help you run well off the bike. So participating in Zwift races is a really fun way to kind of get your competitive fix, but also, get a great workout and help progress your bike power. The other thing you can do is there are virtual triathlons. Granted, they don't include swim, but Ironman has their VR series. And it's a great way to test yourself and put yourself in a competitive environment. So I would definitely suggest looking into things like that. It just creates community. I think it inspires you a little bit. That's definitely, I think, a good way to help test yourself. And when triathlons do come back, just putting yourself into local triathlons that are a range of distances, from sprint to Olympic to, I don't know, maybe a little bit longer if that's something you feel comfortable with. I would just say try to get as much experience as possible. What do you think, Linz?
Yeah, and I was going to say the other thing is too, if you don't have a collegiate team, tap into maybe a local USAT club team. So it may not be collegiate based, but I know that at Montana we had a team in Missoula, and then we also had the club team, and we did a lot of stuff together. But there's so much to be learned from the triathlon community in general that I think, yeah, even if you don't have a collegiate team, don't feel limited by that at all. But I think, yeah, looking to train with local training groups, even if it's just a running group or a swimming group or a biking group, but if you do have a club team in your area, that's a great resource too.
Awesome. Linsey, this question is specifically for you. Do you have a favorite collegiate club nationals memory?
Oh, most of my collegiate memories are Wildflower, and hopefully the race will come back so that some of you will be able to experience it. But I went to college with Ben Hoffman, who is another professional triathlete that's had a wonderful career. And I have just fond memories of road tripping down together to the collegiate race in a Suburban with Ben and all of our other teammates, and sleeping on the ground. And if you haven't done Wildflower, the professional race is on Saturday and the collegiate race is Sunday. And every year our coach would beg us to not watch the professional race because we would run around all day long and waste all of our energy on the pros, and then we would blow our races the next day. But we were so starstruck by the pros that we did it anyways. And Wildflower just has all these hills. So we'd be running up and down the hills watching the collegiate athletes race. But we won the title at Wildflower, I think 2 years in a row, back to back. And so probably my best memories are at the Wildflower Triathlon. And then I ended up moving over and racing as a professional in the half Ironman. So I got to race on Saturday, and then the Montana club team would cheer me on while I was racing. So lots of fond memories from Wildflower.
Cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
This is a question from somebody that sent in college. This person did not initially participate in triathlon. They played basketball in college and was wondering, what is the best way to transition into endurance sports when they don't necessarily have a background in any of the disciplines, running, biking, or swimming?
Yeah, I mean, I think that any activity that you can do outdoors can push yourself and transition over. So I definitely didn't. I mean, I grew up running, but both Sarah and I coincidentally actually have backgrounds in ski racing. So we were both ski racers growing up. And so for me, I think to be a good triathlete, or one of the bases of being triathlete, is having strength and durability. And so even if you don't have a background, I mean, I definitely was not a swimmer. That was new to me. But I think having a diversity of sports helps you out. So I did a lot of backpacking and camping when I was late in high school and early in college. And I think just the resiliency of like carrying a backpack, being in the mountains, hiking, doing these endurance trail runs, for sure that kind of set me up. So I don't think that for sure as a younger athlete, you should feel limited to just swim, bike, run, because ultimately you want like a strong, durable body to be able to withstand and deal with endurance. So I honestly think if there's something that sounds fun to you and it sparks your interest, you could totally go for it. Like I know a lot of people that are surfing right now because they can't swim, but that upper body workout from just the surfing and being in the water is helping them become better athletes.
Yeah, I would just add to that exactly what, to echo what Linsey said. I didn't do triathlon in college. I did not grow up as a swimmer. If you've ever watched me swim, you'll know. But I don't think that limits you. I think now we're seeing triathlon coming in as a collegiate sport. But when we were in college, I guess it was a club sport in Montana, but that didn't exist where I was. So and I think if you look at a lot of the pros, so many of them come from different backgrounds. Rinny was a basketball player, if you know Miranda Carfrey, or Julie Dibbins, who retired several years ago. She was a collegiate swimmer. There are a bunch of people that were runners. There are people that played basketball, or I don't know, were ski racers. I think having some background, just moving your body and liking to be outside, and that can easily transition well into doing triathlon.
There's a ton of rowers too. I don't know if there's any
ton of rowers. Yeah.
Like rowers have this ability to like endurance and manage pain, but the Ortels, Jordan Rapp, I know a bunch of rowers that are triathletes. So if rowing is your calling, go for it.
and Heather Jackson played ice hockey growing up. I mean, that's what she did in college. She was trying to make the Olympic team for ice hockey. So many of us come from a wide range of athletic backgrounds that have absolutely nothing to do with triathlon. And here we are.
What's your favorite non-swimming, biking, and running workout?
I like to surf. That's probably the thing I like to do most, or ski.
I personally have gotten into yoga in the last year or 2 years, so not necessarily like a hardcore workout, but I definitely enjoy the yoga, and it's allowed me to like push myself and also try to maintain some calmness at the same time.
What do you guys focus on to give 100% on race day? Do you have a mantra? Do you have a visualization? What's something that you look at or think about so that you can give that 100%?
It's a really good question. I was just talking about this on my ride this morning with Chelsea, my teammate, about how incredible our bodies are and the capacity that we have. I mean, I definitely think that adrenaline, when it kicks in for a race, it just really helps you take it to the next level. But it's interesting because I mean, I get the question a lot about how do you stay focused? How do you like keep pushing the effort? And for me, it's really about breaking it down into these really small challenges. So like if I see, I'm riding a power that number that I'm really happy with, it's just thinking about trying to keep it at that number. Or like then I'm thinking about my pedal stroke, or if I'm running at a pace, it's like, okay, just like try to hold on to this pace. Or if things try to drop off, I try to challenge myself just to run a couple seconds faster. So it's sort of almost like creating these little mini competitions in my own head, like just trying to see what the limits of my body are on that day. I would say that's probably how I do it in terms of trying to get the most out of myself.
I would echo sentiments similar to Sarah, and that a lot of the time when I'm racing, it's very focused on the present. And so like, let's say I had a bad swim. I'm not thinking about the bad swim. It's like, okay, let's ride as efficiently as I can this first 5 miles of the bike. And then I get to that 5-mile point on the bike and we reassess. And it's like, okay, have you eaten? Have you drinking? Are you on pace? And then let's ride the next 5 miles as best as you can. Let's forget about what happened in the first 5 miles. And so, yeah, it's taking this big endurance event, particularly the Ironman. When it comes to the marathon, it's definitely like 1 mile at a time, reevaluate. But for me, if my mind is wandering or I'm having thoughts off track, like that to me is a warning sign of like, okay, let's bring it back to the present. And yeah, mantras are great, particularly like later in the race when it gets tough. A lot of the times, like I'll repeat words, or even similar to what Sarah said early on in the Zoom chat about knowing your why, and really channeling back to like when you want to give up, it's like, okay, I'm not going to give up because I'm out here because of all the sacrifices my family gave to me, or going back to whatever that why is.
We have some high schoolers on the call today, and some of them wanted to know maybe what the best advice you could give for those that are younger and thinking about that, that transition, or how they want to make that transition to become a professional triathlete in a few years, and what advice you might give them.
Yeah, I would say this is advice that would be applicable to both high schoolers and collegiate athletes. But when I look back at like the early stages of my career, you hear the saying or the statement a lot: consistency is key. And I think that that's really true to improvement. And so I look back at sort of my earlier days, and I was a bit of a bull in the china shop when it came to my training. You would look at my training peaks graphs, and I would have a couple weeks that were awesome, out of the ballpark. All my friends would be talking about how epic the training was for Linsey Corbin, and they couldn't believe the bike ride I did or the run. And then the next week I would be injured, not motivated, burn out, and then it would be like 2 down weeks. And then I'd be back and I'd be so motivated and so excited, and I would knock it out of the park with like 2 more killer training weeks, and then again, injured, burnout, over it. And so now as I've moved through my career, my training we've tried to like even it out and make it a lot more even keeled. And a lot of the times the training is rather boring and it's not that exciting. But I found that being average, but doing it consistently, day after day after day, week after week after week, has led to greater improvements. And so now I maybe don't have the crazy training weeks that everyone at the water cooler is talking about or that I can brag about, but my overall training hours throughout the year are actually much higher than when I was on this up, down, up, down, up, down path. So I think that, yeah, aiming for consistency is huge in development as an athlete. And sometimes it's a little boring because you have to have the courage to like back off and, maybe not try and run with the boys if you're a girl, or, maybe not keep up with a training partner that's a lot faster than you. So again, I try to be average and consistent over time, especially big blocks of time, like months at a time, versus, being really sporadic.
I'd also add, particularly, well, I think both for high school and college athletes, just to recognize that it's it's a long journey, right? So I've seen a couple of friends come out of college and they wanted to race pro, and they've been so excited, and you have to take racing professionally seriously. Like, it's a very, very serious thing. It's very challenging. There's a lot of mundane training, like, there's a lot of work that has to go into it. But both Linsey and I would say it's taken years for us to build up this platform of resiliency where we're able to do the type of training that we can do now. And when you're younger and you don't have the miles and miles and miles of biking and running in you that we now have, your capacity to do big volume is lower. And I think it's just really important to be mindful of, don't look at the pros that you might look up to right now and try to emulate the volume and the training that they're doing. It's something that has truly been built up over time, and make sure that you're, keeping the volume within a range that's going to keep you from getting injured and burned out and overtrained and too tired, because that's sort of, once you start into that cycle of either injury or overtraining or burnout, it's hard to emerge from that. And so I would just encourage you to, probably less is more right now, and then consistency is king, as Linsey said.
Thanks. That was great advice from both of you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think we have time for one more, and it's a combined question because we kind of got the same from a few people. Tell us a little bit about how you might consider balancing, in the case of a collegiate athlete or a collegiate club athlete, balancing academics with training as a collegiate athlete, or juggling a typical 9-to-5 job with a tri-career. So if you guys could speak to, maybe at the beginning, if you had to juggle a 9-to-5 plus your training, what advice would you give for people, either collegiate athletes or maybe those just out of school and trying to balance their careers, to this training and trying to get to that level?
I'll talk a little bit about the job aspect of it, because when I first graduated from college, I worked in the corporate world before I even discovered triathlon. But once I started doing triathlons and I was working and competing at the same time, I actually feel like I'm an example of somebody that did it all wrong. I was really motivated. I was really excited, and I just wanted to train more and more and more. And so I was trying to train somewhere in the neighborhood of like 13 to 16 hours a week. But I worked in finance and investment banking, and so I was working sometimes over 100 hours a week. And so I was always tired. I was going to bed at like 2 or 3 in the morning all the time, probably what a lot of college students do these days. And I found that I was constantly getting sick and constantly getting injured. And so if I were to look back and do it over again, I think what I would have done is actually trained less, like maybe trained 8 hours, or like, let's say maybe tried to fit in like 2 or 3 days of training during the work week, and then on the weekends done like a little bit more volume type of thing. But I think rest and sleep are really, really important things. And I think that you can't underestimate the impact and the stress that sitting at a desk all day and trying to engage with people and working has on your body. And so exercise is certainly important, but I would just say, like, don't try to cram in too many hours of training, that it is going to result in injury or sickness or burnout or all of these things. And so I'd say probably train a little bit less and rest a little bit more.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo a little bit of what Sarah said, in that, training a little bit less. And so maybe if your training hours are down, focusing on quality versus quantity. So you take whatever window, or, you think of life as a series of buckets, and you've got your triathlon bucket. Here's what's available to you. But I would think specifically to know what each purpose of each workout is. And so that you don't get this muddled gray area where you're just kind of training and it's not really got a purpose or a value. And so, yeah, you want to maximize the few training hours that you do have. And you also want to maximize the work hours you have. And then you want to maximize the family hours you have. And then you want to maximize the sleep and the recovery as well. So you've got all these different buckets. But I think even without the work-life balance or the student-athlete balance, but just knowing the workouts that you do have, go in with an intention and knowledge of like, here's what this workout is. If this workout is just recovery, it's moving blood, it's active recovery, we're going to take it super duper easy. And if it's a high-end workout, you go in and you know, like, okay, today we're going to hit intervals. We're going to be fired up for this one. If it's a strength-based workout, then you go in and you know beforehand, like, here's the intention of the workout. But I think having intentions, both, in the classroom, in your work life, and then again with your workouts is really helpful.
Right.
I'd actually just add one other thing to that, which is I found when I was working, I was always trying to validate myself in my training. So every time I was going out and training, I was like trying to prove that I was good and that I was training well. And what Linsey just said about taking the easy days really easy, I think it's a sentiment that you're actually seeing a lot these days. But as pros, it's something actually we take really seriously. We're expected to perform on the days of intensity, and on the days we're supposed to ride easy, we take that quite seriously so that we can perform on the important days. And as somebody that's either in college or high school or working a job, you should use the recovery days to your advantage. They're a good way to move the blood, but you don't need to validate yourself on those days either.
Sarah and Linsey, thank you so much for joining us for this USA Triathlon event. It was a pleasure to host the Q&A, and it was awesome to hear your perspective. And I know everybody really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much to everybody that submitted the questions. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Really quick, I just wanted to announce our winners who are on the call, and I will reach out specifically, but the winner of the Rudy Project Trolix glasses are Anne Gione and Jennifer Schnell. The winner of the Volantis helmets are Jillian Carlson and Kat Matthews. And the winner of the 2 Roca gift cards are Patrick McCann and Suzanne Giro. I apologize if I mess up any of your last names. Please accept my apology. But thank you so much, Sarah and Linsey. What a joy to have you both. And it's a great thing for us to have you talk a little bit about your experience and give everybody some motivation and some extra motivation given the climate that we're in today. So thanks both for your time.
Yeah, thanks
so much
for having us.
Bye, everybody.